Nyla Carter was supposed to be asking for donations tonight. Instead, she was sprinting across a marble ballroom floor in 4-inch heels because she had caught a sniper on the rooftop across the street, and her body was already moving before her brain finished the sentence. She hit the stage steps at full speed. The gunshot cracked through the air like a thunderclap. She launched herself forward and collided with the man at the podium with everything she had, and they hit the floor together as a glass sculpture behind them exploded into 1,000 pieces. Screaming. Chaos. Security flooding in from every direction. And Park Tae-woo, Korea's most feared mafia boss, a man no one had ever surprised in his life, lay flat on his back on a stage, staring up at the woman who had just saved him, completely speechless. 3 years ago, Nyla Carter lost everything. Her career. Her reputation. Her future. Tonight, she just saved the life of the devil himself. And neither of them knew yet, the bullet wasn't the only thing coming for them. For most people, losing a dream was something they feared. For Nyla Carter, it was something she had already survived. At 25 years old, Nyla had once been one of the brightest stars in women's soccer. Born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia, she had spent her childhood chasing a ball across dusty neighborhood fields while other kids played games on their phones. Her talent was impossible to ignore. By the time she was 18, professional scouts were already calling. By 21, she was playing for one of Europe's top clubs. And by 23, she had become a household name after helping the U.S. women's national team win major international tournaments. Fans called her Black Lightning. The nickname wasn't just because of her dark complexion. It was because no defender could catch her once she started running. Her speed was legendary. Endorsement deals poured in. Magazine covers followed. Millions of young girls dreamed of becoming the next Nyla Carter. She had everything. Until she lost it all. The disaster began during a championship match in Europe. One wrong tackle. One terrible landing. One sharp pain that shot through her knee. The injury was devastating. Doctors tried everything, but the damage was severe. Months of rehabilitation turned into years of frustration. Just as she was fighting her way back onto the field, another blow struck. A media scandal exploded across sports networks. Anonymous sources accused her of being connected to match-fixing operations. There was no real evidence, but the headlines spread faster than the truth. Sponsors immediately distanced themselves. Contracts vanished. Teams stopped calling. Her reputation crumbled overnight. The woman once celebrated as America's soccer queen became a cautionary tale. Eventually, with her career destroyed and her knee no longer capable of competing at the highest level, Nyla announced her retirement. The decision broke her heart, but it didn't break her spirit. Instead of giving up, she turned her pain into purpose. Using what remained of her savings, she established a youth sports foundation dedicated to helping disadvantaged girls. She wanted them to have opportunities she never had growing up. Every day, she coached children, organized community programs, and fought to keep the foundation alive despite constant financial struggles. It wasn't the life she had imagined, but it was a life she was proud of. One afternoon, while reviewing paperwork at her Atlanta office, an email arrived that could change everything. A major Korean corporation had expressed interest in sponsoring her foundation. If the deal went through, it would provide enough funding to expand her programs internationally. For the first time in years, hope returned. A week later, Nyla boarded a flight to Seoul. As the city lights appeared beneath the airplane window, she couldn't help feeling nervous. This trip represented more than a business opportunity. It represented a second chance. The charity gala was already in full swing. Crystal chandeliers threw light across 400 of Seoul's most powerful people. The air smelled like perfume and old money. A string quartet played in the corner. Waiters moved through the crowd with champagne flutes. Nyla accepted a glass she didn't plan to drink and began scanning the room. She had 45 minutes to find Kim Dae-young, the CEO of Hana Sports Group, get 5 minutes of his attention, and make him fall in love with the Carter Girls Foundation before the formal dinner seating locked everyone into assigned chairs. That was the mission. That was the only reason she was here, 10,000 miles from Atlanta. She spotted Kim Dae-young near the far end of the room, deep in conversation with two men in suits. She began moving toward him. That was when she noticed the man on the stage. Not because he was performing. Not because anyone was introducing him. He was simply standing near the podium, listening to an aide murmur something in his ear, and yet, somehow, the entire room organized itself around him without meaning to. Conversations turned in his direction like flowers turning toward light. People didn't stare. They were too polished for that. But they were aware of him in the way you're aware of a lit match in a dark room. He was tall, late 30s, broad-shouldered, and dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit. His sharp features and calm confidence commanded attention without effort. Nyla looked away and kept walking. She was 12 feet from Kim Dae-young when she glanced at the floor-to-ceiling window to her left, purely out of habit, the way athletes develop a peripheral sense that never fully switches off, and saw it. A reflection. A glint. Something on the roof of the building across the street that caught the light wrong. She stopped walking. Her brain processed it before her body did. The angle. The elevation. The window directly behind the podium where the man in the dark suit was now stepping forward to speak. 3 seconds passed. She moved. Nyla Carter crossed that room in 4 strides like she was breaking through a defensive line, hit the stage steps at full speed, and launched herself forward just as the sound arrived, a single, sharp crack that split the elegant silence like an axe through porcelain. She collided with him full force. The bullet missed his skull by 8 inches and detonated a glass sculpture on the pedestal behind the podium, sending fragments across the front row in a silver explosion. The room erupted. Screaming. Chairs overturning. The string quartet abandoning their instruments. Security personnel appeared from doorways that Nyla hadn't even registered as doors. She pushed herself up onto her hands, heart slamming, and found herself face to face with the man she'd just knocked flat. He was staring at her. Dark eyes, completely still, locked onto her face with an intensity that made the chaos around them feel very far away. "Are you hurt?" she said. He blinked once. "No." "Good." She pushed herself to her feet. Her left heel had snapped clean off. "Because I just ruined my shoes for you, and I don't even know your name." She heard his voice behind her as security swept her forward, quiet, almost amused, cutting through the noise like it was nothing. "Park Tae-woo," he said. "And you are?" She didn't answer. Because right then 2 men in black earpieces physically lifted her off the ground. Park Tae-woo, according to the media, was one of Korea's most successful businessmen, the CEO of a powerful international corporation worth billions. Journalists admired him. Investors trusted him. The public respected him. But only a handful of people knew the truth. Park Tae-woo was one of the most feared mafia bosses in Asia. His legitimate businesses concealed an underground empire built on power, influence, and dangerous secrets. Welcome to Nyla and Taewoo's journey. Drop a love emoji in the comment section as we continue. Nyla Carter woke up in someone else's penthouse. She sat up slowly and took inventory. Silk sheets. A bedroom the size of her Atlanta apartment. A glass of water on the nightstand. Her gown, still on her body. One shoe. She stood up. Her knee ached dully, it always did after impact, but it held. She tried the door. It opened. The living room beyond it was the size of a hotel lobby, low sectional furniture in charcoal and cream, abstract art on the walls, a kitchen that had clearly never been used for cooking. 3 men stood at various points around the space. All of them looked at her when she emerged. None of them moved. "Someone wants to tell me where I am," she said. "Ms. Carter." One of the men, older, silver-haired, suit impeccably pressed, inclined his head. "Please make yourself comfortable. Mr. Park will join you shortly. Mr. Park can join me in answering my question. Where am I, and am I free to leave?" A door at the far end of the room opened. Park Tae-woo walked in like the room had been designed specifically to hold him. He'd changed out of the event suit, dark trousers now, a simple black shirt, sleeves rolled to the forearm. No tie. No armor. He looked less like a businessman and more like something that had learned to wear the costume. He studied her standing there in one shoe, arms crossed, and something moved at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. You can leave, he said. But I'd ask that you hear me out first. Talk fast, Nyla said. I had a meeting tonight that your bullet interrupted. My bullet. He tilted his head. You make it sound like I arranged it. Did you? No. He moved to the seating area and lowered himself into a chair without invitation or apology, the way people move in spaces they fully own. Sit down, Miss Carter. I'll stand. He accepted that without argument. The men who fired that shot tonight believe you are significant to me. They saw you risk your life to protect mine. In their world, and unfortunately, in mine, that means you are now a person of value. A leverage point. Nyla stared at him. I don't know you. I was across the room and I saw a sniper and I moved. That's it. That's the whole story. I know that. They don't. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees. If you walk out of here tonight and go back to your hotel, you will be dead before morning. The room went very quiet. So this is protective custody, Nyla said flatly. Without my consent. It's a temporary situation. It's kidnapping. The door is unlocked. The men with earpieces are locked. That silenced him. Just for a second. Then, and she wasn't imagining it, the corner of his mouth moved again. 24 hours, he said. Give me 24 hours to neutralize the immediate threat. Then you go home. Nyla looked at him for a long moment. Looked at the three men positioned around the room like furniture. Looked at the city glittering behind the glass, beautiful and indifferent. You have 18, she said. The 18 hours became 3 days. Not because Tewu forced it. Because on the second morning, Nyla walked into the kitchen looking for coffee and found one of the security teams sitting at the counter trying, and visibly failing, to use a French press, and she laughed for the first time in longer than she could remember. It surprised her so much she stood there for a second with her hand over her mouth. Tewu appeared in the doorway behind her. He looked at the security guard. He looked at Nyla. He's been staring at it for 20 minutes, he said. It's not that complicated, she said. Tell him that. She made the coffee. The guard looked deeply grateful. Tewu sat at the far end of the counter with a cup she handed him and watched her with those dark, measuring eyes and didn't say anything for a while. You don't sleep past 5, he finally said. You notice things, she said, without making it a compliment. Occupational habit. Mine too. She wrapped both hands around her cup. I used to wake up at 4:30 to train. Even now, even years later, my body doesn't know how to stop. What do you train for now? She looked at him. I run a foundation for girls who can't afford sports programs. I coach. I fundraise. I give them what someone should have given me when I was 12 and angry and had nowhere to put it. Something in his expression shifted. Not much, but enough. Is that why you came to Seoul? He asked. Hannah's sports group was supposed to sponsor us. $50,000 would fund 3 programs for a full year. She set her cup down. That meeting didn't happen. He was quiet for a moment. I can arrange the meeting. I don't need your charity. It's not charity. Kim Dae-young owes me dinner. His tone was neutral. Matter of fact. I'll make a call. She looked at him for a long moment, searching for the angle. There was always an angle. That was something her career had taught her long before the scandal did. Why? She said. Because you saved my life, he said simply. And because your foundation sounds like it matters. She didn't have a response to that. She wasn't sure she needed one. That afternoon, Taiwa's aide brought her a laptop so she could work. She spent 2 hours reviewing foundation financials, answering emails from her program coordinator in Atlanta, and trying very hard not to notice that Park Tae-woo was 40 feet away in the main room doing the same thing, quiet, still, working through documents with a focused intensity that reminded her of her own pregame rituals. On the third day, she found the files by accident. She hadn't been snooping. She had been looking for a printer driver on the shared network and clicked on a folder that opened before she could stop it. Financial records. Transfer logs. International account numbers, dates, organization names. She almost closed it. Then she saw a name. She leaned closer. Read it again. Kong Sports International. A Korean entity. Registered 2018. Cross-referenced with 3 offshore shell companies. And at the bottom of the transfer log, a name she hadn't seen in 3 years, but that lived in her memory like a splinter that never healed. Maxwell Sports Agency. Her old agency. The one that had dropped her 4 days before the scandal broke. Her hands went cold. She sat there in the silence of the penthouse guest room and began to read. It took her 40 minutes to understand what she was looking at. Another hour to confirm it. By the time she pushed back from the desk, she was shaking, not with fear. With something worse. The specific, hollow shock of having your worst suspicion proven true. The match-fixing scandal that ended her career had not been random. Someone had deliberately targeted her. The manipulation of the betting markets around the 2022 qualifier matches, the same matches she'd been falsely accused of throwing, had been orchestrated by an international sports betting ring with connections to at least 3 Korean-based entities, one of which was connected to the same criminal organization currently trying to kill Park Tae-woo. She closed the folder, sat very still. Then she stood up, walked to the door of the guest room, opened it, and said, "Tae-woo, I need to talk to you. Now." He looked up from across the room. Something in her face made him set down his phone immediately. She laid it out for him clearly. The folder. The transfers. The names. The connection. He listened without interrupting, completely still, elbows on his knees, eyes on her face the entire time. When she finished, the room was quiet enough to hear the city outside. "You knew," she said. "About the betting ring." "I knew they existed," he said carefully. "I didn't know about your connection to them. They destroyed my career, Tae-woo." Her voice stayed level. She had trained herself years ago not to break when it mattered. "I lost everything. My contract. My reputation. My place on the national team. I spent 2 years in legal proceedings and therapy and rebuilding from nothing." She exhaled slowly. "And you're telling me the people who did that to me are the same people trying to kill you?" "Yes." "So my being here, my trip to Seoul, it wasn't a coincidence." He looked at her steadily. "Tell me about the invitation." She frowned. "The Hannah Sports Group sponsorship inquiry. I got an email 3 weeks ago from..." She stopped. "From who?" he said quietly. She thought about it. "From a contact I'd never worked with before. A referral from someone in the Korean athletics community. I didn't think twice about it because the offer was legitimate and the gala was real." "Someone wanted you in that room," he said. "Why?" He was quiet for a moment. "Because you are connected to their criminal enterprise, even if you didn't know it. A compromised former athlete in the same room as me. If anything went wrong, they had someone to blame. Or to use." The realization landed like a fist to the sternum. "I was bait," she said. "Or a contingency," he said. "Either way, you were meant to be here." She stood up abruptly, walked to the window, stood there looking at the city below, her reflection pale and sharp in the glass. "Then I'm not leaving," she said. He blinked. "What?" She turned around. "They took 3 years from me. My career. My name. My girls watched their coach get dragged through the mud on national television." Her jaw was set. "I want everything they have. Evidence. Names. Proof. I'm not leaving Seoul until I have it." Tae-woo stared at her for a long moment. "You understand what you're asking," he said. "This isn't a sports dispute. These people..." "I know what these people do," she said. "I know because I have spent 3 years living with what they already did to me." Her eyes were steady. "Absolute. Help me or don't. But I'm not running." The silence between them held for 3 full seconds. "I'll help you," he said. And then, so quietly it was almost to himself, "God help me." They worked alongside each other in the evenings after Tae-woo's daytime meetings, her on the betting ring files, him on intelligence from his network, building the picture piece by piece across a dining room table covered in printed documents and cold coffee cups. His lead analyst, a quietly brilliant man named Song, would appear with new data, look at the two of them bent over the table 3 inches apart, and find somewhere else to be very quickly. It was during those evenings that Nyla began to understand who Park Tae-woo actually was beneath the empire and the reputation, and the bodyguards posted outside every door. He was methodical, patient. He could sit with a complex problem for an hour without speaking and then say exactly the right thing. He had a sense of humor that appeared without warning and disappeared just as quickly, dry and precise as a scalpel. He remembered everything she told him casually, without making it a point, just referencing it at the right moment, the way people do when they are genuinely listening and not just waiting to speak. One evening she mentioned, offhandedly, that her foundation girls had a regional tournament coming up in 3 weeks. He disappeared for 30 minutes. When he came back, he set his phone down, picked up his documents, and said nothing. 2 days later, Song placed a folder in front of her containing wire transfer confirmation for the full tournament registration, travel, and accommodation costs for 12 girls and 3 coaches. She looked at it. Looked at Taewoo across the table. He was reading a document and did not look up. Taewoo. You funded my tournament. Song handles administrative logistics. Taewoo. He looked up. His expression was perfectly composed. Thank you, she said. Something moved across his face, quick, almost startled, like he'd been caught doing something he hadn't planned. He looked back at his document. The competition will be good for their development. She smiled despite herself and said nothing more. That night he walked her past a floor-to-ceiling bookshelf in the study, and she pulled out a worn copy of a Korean novel she didn't recognize. He took it from her hands with a care that surprised her, turned it over, and said quietly that his mother had given it to him when he was 8 years old. The only book she'd ever given him. She died when he was 10. Nyla didn't say she was sorry. She said, "Read me the first line." He looked at her. Then he opened the book, and in the low light of the study, Park Tae-woo, Korea's most feared mafia boss, a man whose name made powerful people sweat, read her the first line of a novel in Korean, and then translated it without being asked. The bravest thing I ever did was stay when everything told me to run. The silence afterward was the kind you don't fill. But the warmth was a complication. Nyla knew it the morning she caught herself watching him across the kitchen, him unaware, standing at the counter scrolling his phone with his coffee, in a gray shirt with his guard down, and felt something warm move through her chest that had absolutely nothing to do with the case. She looked away and made herself remember Maxwell's sports agency, the leaked footage, the headlines, the teammate who swore she'd never fix a match and then stopped returning her calls. The 2 years of silence from people who had called themselves friends. Trust was a luxury she'd paid for once and couldn't afford twice. She filed it away, kept her walls up, kept her voice professional. She was very good at it. She had been practicing for 3 years. What she hadn't practiced for was a jealous mafia boss. It started when Kim Dae-young came to the penthouse for the meeting Taewoo had arranged. Nyla changed into a blazer, put her foundation presentation together, and spent 40 minutes working through it with Kim Dae-young, who turned out to be engaging and genuinely interested. They laughed twice. He asked thoughtful questions. When he left, he had agreed to a partnership. She was celebrating quietly in the kitchen, just a small, private fist pump she thought no one saw, when Taewoo appeared. "How did it go?" he said. "Fantastic. He's in. Full sponsorship, 3-year commitment." She beamed. He was great, actually. Really personable. Taewoo's expression went very neutral in a way she was starting to recognize. He seemed, Taewoo said, quite taken with you. She stopped. Looked at him. He's 63. Successful men don't have an age limit on poor decisions. She blinked. "Are you?" She tilted her head. "Park Taewoo, are you jealous of my business meeting?" I'm observing that he held eye contact longer than is professionally standard. He was listening to my presentation. For 40 minutes. "It's a 20-slide deck. He commented on your blazer. He said it was a nice color." Taewoo said nothing. His jaw was set in that particular way she'd begun to privately call his extremely composed disaster face. Nyla stared at him. Then she started laughing. Actually laughing the full, unguarded kind she hadn't done in front of another person in years. She laughed until she had to hold the counter. Taewoo watched her laugh at him with the expression of a man who was discovering that being laughed at by this specific woman was somehow not entirely the problem he expected it to be. "You are absolutely unbelievable," she managed finally. "I am being practical. You are being ridiculous. Those two things are not mutually exclusive." She pressed her lips together to stop smiling and failed completely. He watched her and slowly, against what appeared to be his better judgment, the corner of his mouth curved. It was the first time she'd seen him fully smile. It hit her somewhere in the region of her sternum, and she immediately looked at the counter. "Go to your mob boss things," she said. "I have evidence to organize." "Don't call it that. You literally run a criminal empire." "I prefer complex operational network." She was still smiling when she left the kitchen. She didn't let herself think too hard about why. The break came on a Tuesday. Nyla had been cross-referencing the shell company accounts against international sports governance records when she found the thread. A single transaction, dated 4 days before the 2022 qualifier match in question, routed through a Cayman account to a private individual in Atlanta. She recognized the recipient name, Marcus Webb, her former assistant coach, the man who had submitted the initial complaint to the federation that triggered the investigation against her. She sat back, connected the dots slowly and carefully, the way Teo had taught her no assumptions, only what the evidence actually said. Marcus Webb had been paid $78,000 4 days before he filed a complaint that ended her career. She took a screenshot, then another. Then she began building a folder, clean, organized, sequenced, the way she would have built a case study for an athletic strategy review. Evidence. Timeline. Names. Money trail. She was so absorbed she didn't hear Tu come in until he set a plate of food beside her laptop. She looked at the plate, then at him. "You cooked," she said. "Song cooked," he said. "I directed." "Uh-huh. I supervised." "You watched." Supervision and watching are not the same thing, yes, you've said. She looked down at the food. "You tell him what I like?" "You mentioned you hadn't eaten anything spicy since you landed and you missed it," he said, as if this were a purely administrative matter. She looked at the plate. Tteokbokki spicy rice cakes, the smell rising off them in warm, sharp waves. Her stomach responded immediately. "Taewoo," she said. "Eat," he said. "Then show me what you found." She ate. Then she showed him. He studied the transfer record for a long time without speaking. "Marcus Webb," he said. "He coached alongside me for 4 years. He knew my training schedule, my team relationships, my contract clauses." Her voice stayed even. He had everything he needed to make the accusation credible. "Do you know where he is now?" "Still in Atlanta. Still coaching." He got a head coaching position at a university 8 months after the federation cleared him. Her jaw tightened. "He built a career on the rubble of mine." Taewoo closed the folder. "I'll have my people locate him. Bring him into a formal deposition." "Bring him into," she stared. "That's not how legal proceedings work." "In a formal legal sense, no." Taewoo. He met her eyes steadily. "He'll be in a meeting room with a lawyer and a recorder. No one will touch him. But he will talk." She looked at him for a long moment. The part of her that still believed in systems wanted to argue. The part of her that had spent 3 years watching those systems fail her said nothing. "I want to be in the room," she said. "No, that wasn't a request." He looked at her. The silence stretched. "Fine," he said. "But you don't speak unless I signal you." She pressed her lips together. Nodded once. He moved toward the door, then stopped. Didn't turn around. "It's going to unravel," he said quietly. "Everything they built. Everything they took from you. It's going to come undone." She believed him in a way she hadn't believed anything in a long time. That scared her more than the evidence. She should have known something was wrong by the way Song looked at her that morning. He appeared in the hallway outside her room at 6:45 a.m., earlier than usual, his composure slightly off in a way that was almost imperceptible but wasn't. "Mr. Park would like you to join him for breakfast," Song said. She followed him. Taewoo was at the table but not eating, sitting very still, his phone face down, his expression the locked door version of himself that she'd stopped seeing weeks ago. It was back now, and it made something in her chest tighten. "What happened?" she said. He looked at her. "Ji-hun," he said. "Just the name. Your lieutenant. My most trusted man. 14 years. Something moved through his face, controlled, compressed. "He's been working for the Shin syndicate." She sat down slowly. "How long?" "We don't know yet." Taewoo. His phone buzzed. He looked at it. His expression didn't change, but she felt the room change around him the way weather changes before a storm arrives, something in the air, something electrical. He stood up. Song, he said. Song appeared immediately from the kitchen. Get her out of the building, Tu said. Now. The secondary. Nyla heard it before she understood it, the sound of the elevator mechanism engaging. Not the front elevator. The service lift. Coming up fast. Tu moved between her and the service corridor without thinking about it. Instinct. Automatic. Song had her arm. She went. Later, she would not remember the exact sequence, the stairwell, the basement exit, the black car that appeared at the service entrance with a driver who already knew where to go. She would remember the sound above them as the penthouse floor registered multiple impacts. She would remember Song saying, calmly, Mr. Park will meet us at the secondary location. He didn't. The men who took her were professionals. They separated her from Song at a traffic stop, 2 cars, a coordinated block, so smooth it was over before she processed it. She was in a different vehicle. Moving. The city scrolling past tinted glass. She breathed. She had a torn ACL at 26 and finished the game. She was not going to panic in the back of a car. She assessed 3 men. 1 driver, 2 beside her. The man to her left had his earpiece in his right ear, meaning he was focused primarily left, watching their perimeter, not her. The man to her right was the one in charge. He told her, in careful English, that no one would hurt her as long as Park Tae-woo cooperated. She filed that away. Then she looked at the vehicle. An SUV. 7 years old at minimum, she'd clocked the model. 3rd-row seating folded flat. Child lock indicators on the door panels, meaning she couldn't open the doors from inside. But the window controls were in the center console. She began calculating. They drove for 32 minutes. The SUV slowed. Industrial district, she could hear it in the ambient sound, the drop in traffic noise, the quality of the light changing through the glass. They parked. The man to her right reached for the door handle. She moved. 3 years of running every morning. 8 years of sprint training before that. A body that had been rebuilt from a torn ligament at the cost of 18 months and more pain than she told anyone about. She used all of it. She lunged for the center console, hit the window override, got the rear passenger window down 6 inches before someone grabbed her arm. And she used that grip as leverage to drive her elbow backward and up into the jaw of the man on her left with enough force that she heard the sound and felt him go slack. Then she was out of the vehicle through the half-open window, scraping her shoulder on the frame, hitting the ground on her palms and rolling the way her conditioning coach had taught her, protect the knee, protect the spine, and coming up running. Industrial warehouse district. Exactly what she'd calculated from the sounds. Long sight lines. Fence line to the east. She went east. She ran for 11 minutes. She didn't stop. Tae-woo found her 40 minutes later. She was sitting on the floor of a convenience store 3 blocks from the warehouse district, barefoot. She'd lost 1 shoe in the vehicle and pulled the other off because she was not making the same mistake twice. With a bottle of water the owner had given her and her heart rate finally dropping below 150. She heard the cars before she saw them. 3 vehicles pulling to the curb outside. Doors opening. Tae-woo came through the door and stopped. She looked at him. He looked at her. Her shoulder was scraped from the window frame. Her palms were red from the ground. His face did something she'd never seen it do before. Every wall, every layer of carefully maintained composure gone. Just for a second. Then controlled again. He crossed the space between them in 3 steps, crouched in front of her, and put both hands on the sides of her face with a gentleness that was so completely at odds with everything she knew about him that her throat tightened. Are you hurt? He said. I'm fine. Nyla. Elbow to a jaw, shoulder on a window frame, palms on asphalt. Nothing structural. She held his gaze. I got out. You got out, he repeated. Like he needed to hear it. I told you I wasn't running, she said. I meant it either way. He stayed there for a long moment. Close enough that she could see the exact moment something in his eyes shifted, away from controlled, away from composed, into something much more honest and much more dangerous. Then he stood up, and she took the hand he extended, and she stood beside him, and Song appeared from somewhere with shoes in exactly her size. She didn't even ask how, and the city outside was still moving like nothing had happened. "I have what we need," she said, as they walked to the car. "From the files before they took me. I have everything." He looked at her sideways. "Evidence is in the cloud," she said. "I uploaded the whole folder to a secure drive 2 days ago because I've worked with you long enough to know that physical copies are exactly the kind of thing that disappears." He stopped walking, stared at her. She raised an eyebrow. "You are," he said slowly, "genuinely remarkable." "I know," she said, and got in the car. The evidence she had built, and what Taiwan's network confirmed in the 48 hours that followed, was complete enough to bring the entire structure down. The Shin Syndicate had spent 6 years building a sports manipulation network across 4 continents. They had corrupted officials, framed athletes, destroyed careers, laundered hundreds of millions of dollars through shell companies, and used the resulting chaos to consolidate control over international betting markets. Nyla Carter was one of dozens of athletes whose names had been burnt to provide credibility to their false narratives. Marcus Webb confessed in the meeting room Taewoo had described, lawyer present, recorder running, the evidence laid in front of him so cleanly that denial was physically impossible. He talked for 2 hours. He gave them names they didn't have. He cried, which Nyla watched through one-way glass with her arms crossed and her face very still. Ji-hun, the lieutenant, was extracted from a location Taiwan's network had been quietly tracking for 3 days. What happened in that extraction, Nyla was not present for and did not ask about in detail. She asked only the necessary question, "Is it over?" "The leadership is exposed," Taewoo said. "The evidence goes to Interpol, Korean law enforcement, the International Sports Federation, and 3 independent journalists simultaneously tonight." Simultaneously. So no single entity can suppress it. She nodded. "You've done this before." "I've dismantled structures before," he said carefully. "Usually from the inside." She looked at him. "Is this the last one?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I've been trying to exit this world for 4 years," he said. "Every time I found the door, someone stood in it." He paused. "The legitimate business holdings are real. They've been real for a long time. I just needed the other structure to stop being a weapon someone could use. And now? And now it's dismantled." He met her eyes. "I meant what I said. I want out." She believed him. That was the thing, she actually believed him. "The evidence package goes tonight," she confirmed. "At midnight. Then we wait," she said. They waited. At 12:47 a.m., the first news alert came through. Then the second. Then, within 20 minutes, it was everywhere. Shin Syndicate. International match fixing. Interpol investigation. 14 arrests across 5 countries. A list of organizations implicated. A list of athletes who had been fraudulently targeted. Nyla Carter's name was on that list. She read it on Taiwan's phone while sitting beside him on the penthouse couch, her feet tucked under her, his hand warm on her shoulder because at some point in the last hour it had ended up there and neither of them had moved. She read her own name on the screen and felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years, clean. Not fixed. Not restored. Not yet. But clean. Like the contamination had been pulled out of the wound and now at least it could heal correctly. She exhaled slowly. "Hey," she said. He looked at her. She reached out and covered his hand with hers. Just for a moment. Just to make the point. "Thank you," she said. He turned his hand over and held hers. They stayed like that for a while, watching Seoul go quiet outside the windows, and for the first time in a very long time, Nyla Carter did not feel the need to plan the next move. 1 year later, the Nyla Carter Sports Academy opened in Mapogu, Seoul. It was not what she had originally planned when she landed at Incheon Airport 14 months ago in burgundy heels, with a foundation pitch deck and a meeting that had been set up to use her. It was considerably more than that. The building was 4 stories of practice courts, weight rooms, film study space, and classrooms. It ran year-round programs for 200 girls between the ages of 10 and 17, Korean girls, Nigerian girls, girls from the Korean African community in Itaewon, Girls from every corner of Seoul who had too much energy and nowhere constructive to put it. The Carter Girls Foundation in Atlanta was funding the program model. 3 Korean corporate partners, including Hana Sports Group, were funding the facility. The inaugural ceremony drew more media than Nyla had expected. She stood at the podium on the newly lined pitch and looked out at 200 girls in matching green and gold academy kits, at parents standing along the fence line, at cameras from 3 countries, and felt the particular joy of something that had been built from nothing becoming real. She had notes. She didn't use them. 3 years ago, she said, someone decided I was worth more as a cautionary tale than as a competitor. They were wrong. And I know I'm not the only one who's been told they're finished before their story was over. She looked at the girls. You are never finished. Do you hear me? No matter what they take, and sometimes they will take a lot, you are never finished. She paused. I'm proof. The applause started in the parent section and spread. She was stepping back from the podium when the crowd shifted, a murmur, a ripple of attention, heads turning toward the stage. She turned. Park Tae-woo walked onto the stage. He was in a suit today, charcoal gray, a tie, the full formal version of himself that he wore when he wanted the world to see exactly what he'd built from the rubble of everything he'd dismantled. The Park Group had been legitimate for 11 months now. It was in all the papers. Charitable foundations, sports infrastructure investment, educational partnerships. His legal team had worked every day for a year to make sure of it. He walked toward her. The crowd had gone very quiet in the way crowds do when they sense that whatever comes next is not part of the printed program. She watched him come. You're late, she said quietly, when he reached her. I was never late, he said. I've been right here the entire time. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and went down on one knee. The silence was total. Even the wind seemed to pause. He held up a ring, not ostentatious, not excessive, just a single stone that caught the afternoon light and threw it back in a warm gold that matched the academy kits behind them, and he looked up at her with those dark, careful eyes that had learned, over the course of a year, to stay open instead of closed. You saved my life twice, he said. Once from a bullet and once from myself. His voice was steady and low and intended only for her, even though 200 people and 3 cameras were listening. I have been trying to find a way to be worthy of that. I'm not sure I'm there yet, but I would like to spend however long it takes trying. He paused. Will you marry me? Nyla Carter looked at him. She thought about the woman who had landed in Seoul 14 months ago with one good knee and a ruined reputation and a heel that broke on cobblestone. She thought about everything that had been taken from her and everything that had been given back, and the specific, hard-earned knowledge that the second category was not a consolation prize, but something entirely new. She felt her eyes fill. She didn't stop them. Yes, she said. The crowd erupted. He stood, put the ring on her finger. And when he pulled her close and she pressed her face against his shoulder in front of every camera and every person on that pitch, Nyla Carter decided that this, right here, was better than any championship she had ever won. Because she had chosen it. Because they had both chosen it. Because sometimes the future isn't stolen. Sometimes it's waiting on the other side of the fight. If Nyla's comeback and her strength hit you somewhere real, hit the like button right now. Leave a comment and tell me, were you team Nyla runs solo, or did you see Tae-woo winning her over the whole time? Subscribe if you're new, because the next story on this channel, it's already in production, and if you think this one had tension, you are not ready. Thanks for watching. Don't go anywhere.